Let's imagine you're walking alone through tall, sun-bleached grass on the African savanna. The air is wavy with heat. The horizon is just a white blur, and the only sound is this constant, lazy buzz of insects around your ears. You're watching your footing, but you're not really worried. No trees, no shade, just endless grass and your own crunching footsteps. Then you move one more step. You hear it before you see anything. A dry, electric hiss, like someone just ripped open a live wire, inches from your ankle. The grass explodes. There's a flash of dull brown or glossy black scales, a thick body coiling back on itself, and your brain finally catches up to what your eyes are seeing. Snake. You might think you'd just jump back, right? Easy. But what you actually find is that your foot is already mid-step, your weight is already going down, and time suddenly stretches out into slow motion. The ground feels a mile away. Your heartbeat is way too loud. You can't see the tail, you can barely see the head, but you see the hood flare or the body bunch up, and every nerve in your body is screaming, "Puff adder, cobra, do not mess this up." You look around for options. There's no tree to climb, no rock to scramble onto, no heroic jeep to jump on top of. Just more grass. You know one good bite from a big viper out here can shut your nervous system down in minutes. Your mind starts doing the math you really don't want it to do. Distance to help, how fast venom travels, how long you actually have. And then the grass moves again. You brace for a second snake, or maybe some dramatic lion charging in like a nature documentary crossover episode. Well, no. Instead, something tall just strides into view, like it owns the place. A bird. Almost as tall as your hip, crane-like legs, long tail, ridiculous black lashes painted around sharp, orange-red eyes. It's not flying. It's not even flapping. It just walks straight toward the snake. See, this is the part where any normal bird would be leaving a U-shaped dust cloud behind as it escapes. But this one lowers its head, locks those eyeliner eyes onto the coils, and starts this slow, deliberate march, like it's late to a meeting with death and doesn't have time for your panic. Then it moves. One leg shoots up and comes down in a blur, stomping the ground so fast you can't actually track the foot. There's a crack. The snake's head snaps sideways, and before it can strike, another kick lands, and another, each one like a tiny sledgehammer aimed right at the skull. The bird barely looks stressed. For it, this is Tuesday. This isn't random bravery. This is a specialist, a terrestrial raptor, a walking eagle, a snake-killing stilt built by evolution to hunt on foot, with legs strong enough to crush bone in a single stomp. And yes, these guys are all real. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how this bird became a ground-hunting snake assassin, why it almost never bothers to attack from the sky, and what it takes to walk calmly toward the kind of venom that makes everything else run. So, meet the snake assassin with the most misleading name in bird history. This is the secretary-bird. Scientific name, Sagittarius serpentarius, which sounds like a Harry Potter side character, but you might think secretary means this thing files paperwork and books meetings. What you actually find is a legit raptor. Same crew as eagles, hawks, and vultures, just stretched. Let's imagine you're standing in the African savanna and this bird walks past you. You're looking a 4.3-foot tall bird straight in the eye. That's about 1.3 meters of feathery velociraptor, with a wingspan over 2 meters if it decides to open up those giant arms. From the body up, it's pure eagle, hooked beak built to tear, sharp talons, forward-facing predator stare. From the body down, it's on stilts. Those legs are absurdly long and surprisingly thick, like someone put an eagle on a pair of carbon fiber crutches. Under the feathers, the bones are reinforced, the tendons are like cables, and the toes are shortened and stiffened to turn each step into a potential hammer blow. The whole thing is wrapped in tough, scaly armor that makes snake fangs way less effective. And then there's the fashion choices. See? The face looks like a bird that spent too long watching makeup tutorials. Bright bare skin around the eyes, framed by heavy black eyeliner, plus that spray of dark quill feathers sticking out the back of the head like it's permanently wearing goth office pens. Early Europeans thought those head plumes looked like the quills clerks used to tuck behind their ears, so secretary-bird stuck. Evolution did the murder upgrade. Humans did the branding. Now here's where it really breaks your mental model of a raptor. You're used to birds of prey hunting from the sky, right? Falcons dive like missiles. Eagles drop out of the cold blue and body slam things. The secretary bird can fly perfectly well, but spends almost the entire day walking. It will casually patrol 20 to 30 kilometers on foot, just striding through grass like a marathon runner in armor. And what is it looking for? Not just snakes, even though that's what made it famous in documentaries. Yes, this is the bird you've seen kicking cobras and puff adders to death, stomping so fast the snake barely tracks the movement. But it also nails rodents, lizards, small birds, and huge insects. It's less awkward crane and more cheetah meets eagle, sprinting short bursts, then unleashing machine gun kicks that can hit with several times its body weight. Which raises the big question, why would a bird with perfectly good wings choose to fight venomous snakes on foot, where one mistake means fangs to the leg or straight to the face? Why walk calmly toward the kind of venom everything else runs from? Well, the answer is buried in its anatomy, its ecosystem, and a long evolutionary arms race that turned walking into a weapon. And to see how that happened, you have to watch this bird move in slow motion. You watch it in slow motion, and your brain kind of short-circuits. This thing has a 2-meter wingspan and hawk eyes, but instead of dropping from the sky like a missile, it's jogging through grass, like a very intense, very judgmental stork. You might think a bird built like this would hunt like an eagle. Classic raptor move. Soar hundreds of meters up, lock onto a target, then stoop at freeway speeds and grab it with talons before it even knows what happened. Falcons take that and crank it up, hitting other birds mid-air so fast they basically punch them out of the sky. Owls go stealth mode, gliding in on soundless wings to erase things in the dark. Flying is the superpower. That's the whole raptor brand. But what you actually find with the secretary bird is almost the opposite. This is a sky hunter that spends about 2/3 of its day just walking. It paces the savanna like a patrolling guard, scanning not from above, but from eye level with the grass. When it does spot prey, it doesn't launch. It accelerates. Long legs unfold into a sprint, and instead of a grab, you get a stomp that lands in about 15 milliseconds, with several times the bird's body weight focused into one tiny, unlucky spot. So why is a bird perfectly capable of powered flight acting more like a cheetah that forgot its front half? Why trade the safety of altitude for the worst possible place to fight a venomous snake, right next to its face? On the ground, there's no buffer zone, no diving in, hitting once, and peeling away. Every hunt is fought at bite range, where one fang in the wrong place can end the whole evolutionary experiment. Let's imagine you're that bird for a second. You're tall enough to see over the grass, but the snakes here are fast, cryptic, and armed with neurotoxic or cytotoxic cocktails that do not care how majestic your eyelashes are. Cobras can hood and strike. Puff adders can launch from almost invisible coils. You don't just need to be good, You need to be absurdly overbuilt for this job. So, what combination of savanna, snake behavior, and body design could push a raptor to abandon aerial ambush and become a specialized ground hunter? This is the world of evolutionary bad decisions that somehow worked. Open grasslands where rodents and reptiles are spread out, thermally glowing in the sun. Prey that hides in burrows and under shrubs, where a dive from above would just smack you into a bush. A tall bird that can cover kilometers on foot without burning the giant fuel bill of constant flight. And because the stakes are so high, any adaptation that makes this strategy even slightly safer gets cranked up to the extreme. Thicker leg scales, weirdly stiff toes, shock-absorbing joints, targeting the snake's head with machine-like precision. We're basically looking at a walking weapon system that used to be a normal bird. Well, if you want to know how that's even mechanically possible, next we're going to pull this thing apart like engineers. Legs, wings, skull, the whole chassis, and see exactly how you turn a flying hunter into a ground-based snake assassin. So, if this is a walking weapon system, where does it actually sit on the bird family tree? You might think something this weird has to be its own random invention, like evolution just hit shuffle. But what you actually find is way funnier. This is still a classic bird of prey that just rage quit the sky. Let's imagine you lined up a golden eagle, a hawk, a vulture, and a secretarybird. Genetically, they're all in the same neighborhood, the order Accipitriformes. These are your raptors, your hook-beaked, meat-shredding, small mammal-ruining crew. But then you zoom in further and see something odd. Hawks and eagles are packed into one big family, Accipitridae. The secretary bird, it's off sulking on its own lonely branch, Sagittariidae, a whole separate family that split off early and never came back to the group chat. To see how far it drifted, you have to know what a normal accipitrid looks like. Picture a hawk, relatively short, trunky legs tucked up against the body, feet like 4 tiny bear traps, and talons built to grab and not let go. The wings are broad and huge, perfect for soaring, circling, and then dropping like a rock. The whole hunting strategy is vertical. You own the sky, you wait, you dive, and your prey only realizes it's on the menu in the last half second. Now, cut back to the secretary bird, and it's like someone grabbed that template and dragged the legs slider all the way to the right. This thing stands around 1.3 meters tall, like a 4-foot-something eagle that forgot how to sit down. The legs are exaggerated stilts. The toes are relatively blunt. The grasping power is dialed down, and the body looks like an eagle torso awkwardly balanced on a pair of angry chopsticks. And yes, these guys are all real. This is the world of raptors that decided walking is the new flying. Why would any self-respecting sky predator do that? See, African savannas are not exactly ambush-friendly forests. You get wide, open grasslands, low scattered trees, and a horizon you can see from miles away. From the air, that sounds great, right? But if you're a snake or a rodent, you also see the shadow of a giant bird circling overhead from forever away. Surprise attacks from above stop working when everyone can watch you set up. So evolution tried a different angle. Stay high off the ground, but move sideways. If you can walk fast, you can just patrol, scan, and then sprint. To understand why this bird bets everything on that approach, we have to zoom in on those legs, because they're not just long. They're engineered to deliver one very specific kind of violence, and the way they do it breaks some basic rules of how bird legs are supposed to work. So, from a distance, those legs just look comically long. Up close, you realize they're basically biological weapons. This bird is walking around on 2 loaded spears that just happen to be covered in feathers. Let's imagine you're standing next to one. The secretary bird can be over 4 feet tall, and a ridiculous amount of that height is just leg. The upper leg bones, the tibiotarsus, and the lower tarsometatarssus stretch out like stilts, while the actual feet at the end are tiny. You might think a snake killer would want giant talons, but what you actually find is more like a stilt walker who forgot the boxing gloves. Long, skinny supports, capped with small, hard impact points. Now look at the toes, or, more accurately, the lack of them. Compared to typical raptors, the toe bones, the phalanges, are reduced. Fewer segments, less bend, less grab. An eagle's foot is basically a flying bear trap. It flexes around prey, crushes, and hangs on. This thing? It's closer to a rigid club. When it comes down, the force is funneled through a small, stiff area, which is exactly what you want if your goal is to punch through scales and bone instead of politely holding someone's mouse. And because evolution apparently decided, sure, let's make it even weirder, those stilts are wrapped in armor. The legs and feet are covered in thick, scaly skin, like someone put the bird in natural shin guards. Snakes strike low and fast, aiming for whatever limb is closest. So, you give the limbs a layer of bite-resistant, scratch-resistant, calloused scale. It's not perfect protection, but it turns a lot of potentially lethal hits into annoying, but I'm still stomping you. Underneath that, the real cheat code is the tendon and muscle setup. Long muscles sit higher up the leg, while slender tendons run down toward the foot like tension cables. Those tendons can store elastic energy, the same way a spring or a bowstring does. So when the bird snaps a kick downward, it's not slowly pushing with muscle. It's releasing stored energy in a piston-like strike that can hit in just a few milliseconds. Almost no wind-up. Almost no warning. See, that's the key. These legs aren't designed to grab, lift, and fly off with prey like a normal bird of prey. They're built to strike, stomp, and pin. Perfect for something long, fast, and venomous that lives on the ground. And yes, these guys are all real. A raptor that walks like a crane, kicks like a mule, and treats cobras like bubble wrap. So how do those spring-loaded stilts actually play out in a real fight when the snake finally strikes back? So, to see what those spring-loaded stilts actually do, scientists basically pointed a high-speed camera at bird murder. They brought captive secretary birds into a lab, dangled fake snakes and tiny targets in front of them, and filmed every strike at thousands of frames per second. Because to your eyes, it just looks like a blur and a thud. To the camera, it's a physics lecture with feathers. Let's imagine you're watching in real time. The bird lifts one leg, pauses for a fraction of a heartbeat, then, bam, the foot is suddenly on the target. You might think that took, what, a tenth of a second? Maybe less. But what you actually find, when you slow it down frame by frame, is that the downward kick lands in roughly 15 milliseconds. 1-5. That's faster than a human blink, faster than you snapping your fingers, and way faster than a snake's nervous system can even file a complaint. See, a snake still has to sense the movement, send that signal up the body, process it, and then tell the muscles to move. By the time that whole chain reaction even starts, the secretary bird's foot has already hit, done the damage, and left. For the snake, this isn't a duel. It's lagging on bad Wi-Fi while the boss fight one-shots you from above. Now, speed is only half the horror. The other half is force. This bird might only weigh a few kilograms, but it can deliver several times its own body weight in impact, all focused onto a small area of the prey's head or spine. Imagine someone dropping a bowling ball from a height, but the bowling ball has sharp claws and really good aim. That kind of concentrated energy is enough to crush bone, scramble a brain, or cause catastrophic internal damage in a single stomp. The motion itself is brutally elegant. The leg coils like a compressed spring, then snaps straight down with almost no warning. At the exact moment of impact, the joints lock to stiffen the limb, turning the whole leg into a living hammer. Then, just as fast, it retracts, up and out of strike range before any fangs can swing back. Each kick is a tiny hit-and-run attack. Commit, connect, disappear. From the snake's perspective, this isn't a slow, looming predator you can square up against. It's a series of vertical ambushes from the sky. Blurs of talons slamming down like a pile driver, over and over, never giving you a clean shot in return. This is the world of precision stomping, where winning the fight is less about courage and more about milliseconds and momentum. But speed and power alone don't explain why the bird so often aims for the head, or how it seems to know exactly where to land those kicks, even when the snake is coiled and ready. So how does a brain on stilts turn all that raw physics into surgical accuracy on a moving, venomous target? So, let's imagine you're the snake. You've just been spotted by a 4-foot-tall bird on stilts that's walking straight at you like it's late for a meeting. No dive from above, no dramatic swoop. Just this calm, measured march across the savanna, every step saying, "I see you." How do you even prepare for that? You might think the snake's best move is to bolt. And sometimes it does, shooting through the grass while the secretary bird suddenly shifts gears from casual walk to short, explosive sprint. Those long legs that looked kind of goofy a second ago? Now they're covering ground faster than you'd expect, because this is a raptor that hunts more like a cheetah than an eagle. But what you actually find in a lot of encounters is that the snake doesn't run. It coils. Coiling looks scary. The body bunches up, the head rises, the neck forms that classic S shape you see on warning posters. It's the back off or else pose. But for the bird, this is exactly what it wanted. Once the snake coils, its head is no longer vanishing in the grass or zigzagging all over the place. It's elevated, framed by its own body, and suddenly way more predictable. See, a coiled snake has fewer safe angles to move from, which means a much clearer target zone for a precision kick. And this is where the real nightmare for the snake starts. The secretary bird starts stomping, but this isn't random flailing. Each kick is a fast vertical hammer strike aimed at the head and upper neck, trying to crush the skull, snap vertebrae, or at least rattle the brain hard enough to stun it. High-speed video shows those kicks landing in just a few milliseconds, with several times the bird's body weight concentrated into a tiny impact point. To the snake, it's like getting hit by a falling brick that keeps respawning. Meanwhile, the bird's doing risk management like a pro. Its own head and chest stay leaned back, almost like it's actively trying not to be there. The leg does the dangerous work out in front, stretching the distance between fangs and anything vital. Wings flick out for balance and instant sidesteps, letting the bird pivot around a strike instead of eating it. One bad bite can be game over, so every stomp is paired with a built-in escape route. And yes, these guys are all real. This is the world of trial and error evolution, where the error part usually dies. Any bird that misjudged distance, mistimed a kick, or leaned in a little too far didn't get to pass on its technique. Over thousands of hunts and generations, what survived is this practiced, almost surgical routine. Lure the snake into a coil, lock onto the head, and turn venom into a stationary object. But here's the twist you're not seeing in the slow-motion carnage. Even this brutal accuracy has limits, and some snakes don't play by the usual coiling rules at all. You might think that with kicks like a tiny dinosaur and a highlight reel full of dead cobras, this bird must be straight-up venom-proof, like some feathered superhero that just wades into fangs and shrugs it off. But what you actually find, once you zoom in past the memes and the legends, is way more stressful than that. Let's imagine you're a secretary bird walking into a patch of dry grass that smells like snake. Your whole reputation says, no problem. But your biology is screaming, do not get tagged. Because, well, you're not a tank. You're a tall, lightweight sprinter, balanced on two very breakable stilts. See, the real magic isn't a cheat code in the bloodstream. It's the armor and the footwork. Those long legs are wrapped in thick, overlapping scales that work like built-in shin guards, and the tendons are arranged so the lower leg stays stiff when it hits, turning each stomp into a tiny hammer blow. The bird stays upright, body and head held back, using height and reach to keep the soft parts as far from the business end of the snake as possible. So, does that mean zero venom problems? Not exactly. Some animals that regularly eat venomous snakes do show partial resistance to certain toxins. Mongooses, hedgehogs, even some snakes themselves have tweaks in their nerve receptors or blood chemistry that make specific venoms less effective. It's totally possible secretary birds have a bit of that going on too, especially with the local usual suspects they've been dancing with for millions of years. But partial resistance is not a free bite coupon. It's more like wearing a slightly thicker t-shirt in a knife fight. Better than nothing. Still a terrible plan. Field reports and farmer stories line up on one uncomfortable point. When these birds get hit in the wrong place, they can and do die. A fang into the face, eye, inside of the thigh, or the body where the feathers are thin. That's not a cool origin story. That's game over. And yes, these guys are all real animals with real failure rates. Juveniles that misjudge distance. Adults that slip on loose dirt. Birds that kick a non-coiling snake and suddenly the target is halfway up their leg. You don't see those clips on social media, but the savanna does. So every hunt is a gamble. The giant legs, the 15-millisecond stomp, the habit of going for the head over and over again, all of that exists to shave the odds a little closer to survivable. This is the world of walking into venom with just enough speed and hardware to usually walk back out. But what happens when the snake doesn't play fair at all? When it's too big to stomp safely? Or venom isn't even its main weapon? So, when the snake is too big, too fast, or just playing dirty, where do you go next? You zoom out. You stop looking at the bird or the snake, and you look at the board they're fighting on. Let's imagine you're standing where the secretary bird stands most of its life, in the middle of an African savanna at noon. The ground is a faded yellow carpet of grass, sometimes only ankle high, sometimes waving up to your knees. Scattered acacia trees throw these tiny islands of shade. Shrubs break up the horizon a bit, but mostly, you can see for hundreds of meters in every direction. No dense canopy, no tangled vines, no cool forest shadows to disappear into. You might think a giant bird with a 2-meter wingspan would rule this place from the sky. Big raptor, big open airspace. Easy win, right? But what you actually find is that the sky is kind of a snitch. If you're a snake or a rodent, you can spot a circling eagle from absurdly far away. A bird trying to perch and ambush has almost nowhere to hide. Every tree is isolated. Every dive is telegraphed. By the time a typical raptor folds its wings and commits, the target has already vanished into a burrow or under a clump of grass. See, in a forest, vertical attack is king because you can drop out of nowhere. On the savanna, nowhere doesn't exist. Everything is line of sight. So flying turns into this high visibility, low surprise strategy that actually gives prey a head start. The secretary bird answers that by stepping off the runway and onto the chessboard. It walks. A lot. Up to tens of kilometers a day, just pacing the grass like a slow, elegant metal detector with murder on the mind. By staying low and constantly moving, it can flush things that thought they were invisible. Mice that freeze instead of sprinting, lizards hugging the dirt, snakes coiled in perfect camouflage. One wrong twitch of grass, one tiny movement, and those long legs are already adjusting course. And because it's on the ground, it can do something a diving raptor can't. Interrogate every bush, stomp at burrow entrances, probe termite mounds, and then instantly pivot when something bolts sideways. No long reset, no circling back for another pass. Just step, scan, stomp, repeat. Energy-wise, this is brutal but smart. Getting into the air is expensive. Flapping a 4-kilogram body off the ground over and over is like doing jump squats all day. Soaring is cheap once you're up, but the savanna doesn't always give you the big thermals you want. And hunting small, scattered prey means constant takeoffs and landings. A long-legged, tendon-loaded walker can cruise for hours, burning way less fuel per kilometer than a bird doing endless flight sprints. Now tie that to the snakes. Many of the really dangerous species out here are ground-dwelling ambush predators. They win by being still and invisible, not by chasing. Aerial hunters are great at spotting movement. A snake that doesn't move is basically a glitch in their system. But a methodical, ground-level searcher that physically stomps the landscape? That breaks the rules. The secretary bird isn't waiting for the snake to reveal itself. It's going out and forcing the reveal. This is the world of a raptor that turned walking into a weapon. But if the whole savanna is your chessboard, what happens when another player shows up on the same squares? Jackals, mongooses, even humans, also hunting the snakes you stomp? So, what does that actually look like when your whole hunting strategy is just keep walking? Let's imagine it's barely dawn on the savanna. The air's still cold. The grass is silver with dew, and up in a thorn tree, a pair of secretary birds is already awake, looking way too serious for that hairstyle. You might think a raptor's morning routine is all about dramatic takeoffs and soaring silhouettes. But what you actually find is almost comically low-tech. They drop down from the roost, fold those giant wings, and start doing the world's slowest power walk. Heads bobbing, legs striding, they move out in a straight, purposeful line, like they're clocking in for a shift. This is the world of the daily patrol. A pair, or sometimes a small family group, fans out into a loose formation. One bird here, another 30 or 40 meters over there, all walking in roughly parallel lines. It looks like a search party that forgot the flashlights. See? That spacing is deliberate. Anything that panics and bolts away from one bird risks running straight toward another, so even a clumsy mouse suddenly has to dodge a coordinated raptor grid. Over the course of a day, that grid is huge. These birds can casually cover 20 to 30 kilometers on foot, which is like you walking a half marathon while scanning every crack in the sidewalk for snacks that might bite you back. Each step is a probe. Toes press the grass, legs brush stems, and every few meters they pause to listen. A suspicious rustle? Instant stomp combo. A likely burrow? Quick, savage digging, then more stomps. And yes, these guys are all real stomping addicts. But they're not just out here auditioning for Snake Hunter Extreme Edition. Most of what they actually eat is way less dramatic. Rodents trying to sprint between cover, lizards sunning on bare patches, big insects kicked into the open, even small birds flushed from the grass. Anything the patrol physically disturbs is suddenly on the menu, because when your weapon is attached to your legs, every step can turn into an attack. So where do the snakes fit in? They're the jackpot encounters, hiding inside that mileage. A lot of snakes trust camouflage, not speed. They freeze, blend into the grass, and wait for danger to pass. That works against a lion that strolls by once. It fails horribly against a bird that sweeps the same territory every day in parallel lines for hours. By literally walking their range like a lawnmower with talons, secretary birds drag hidden snakes into the open. More kilometers walk tons more chances to step just a little too close to a cobra or puff adder. And for the snake, that single wrong encounter is the last one. But when you finally do flush a venomous snake at your feet, how do you not die trying to kill it? So when that snake finally explodes out of the grass at your feet, the entire mood flips in half a second. The calm, methodical metronome walk just detaches. It's like someone hit fast forward on the same bird. 1 second it's a lawnmower, the next it's a guided missile on stilts. Let's imagine the prey is a rat first. It bolts, zigzagging through tufts and holes, and you might think a tall, gangly bird would just trip over its own legs. But what you actually find is this thing moving like a tiny feathered ostrich. Long, powerful strides hammer into the dirt, body pitched forward, tail and crest streaming behind it. See, the wings don't flap. They crack open just a little, like a tightrope walker's arms, giving balance as the ground turns into a mess of burrows, rocks, and thorny scrub. Each step clears half a meter. Easy. For a snake or rodent that lives its whole life 10 centimeters off the ground, that's a giant problem. From your angle, it almost looks wrong. Raptors are supposed to dive, right? But this one is sprinting, eating up distance like a cheetah that forgot how to cat. The legs are doing all the work, tendons acting like springs, storing and releasing energy with every stride, so it can keep this up for hundreds of meters if it has to. And it's not just run straight at the thing and hope. The bird is steering. It angles itself just behind and slightly off to the side of the fleeing animal, nudging it away from thorn thickets, logs, or burrows. Every time the prey tries to cut toward cover, the bird cuts harder, herding it back into a patch of open short grass where there are no escape hatches. Well, that works on rats. Snakes play a different game. A cobra or puff adder will sprint for a few frantic seconds, body whipping in S-curves, then suddenly realize it cannot outrun a 2-meter-tall murder stilt. So it slams on the brakes. The bird does too. This is the switch. In a single stride, the chase turns into a duel. The snake coils, head up, mouth open. At the exact same moment, the secretary bird drops its center of mass back, plants one foot, and rebalance brakes so hard you can almost hear the tendons load. The very next heartbeat is all legs. 1 foot pins, the other snaps up and down in a blur, like a piston. High-speed video shows that first kick landing in about 15 milliseconds, with several times the bird's body weight focused into a tiny area. For the snake, that's the difference between ready to strike and lights out, before its nervous system even finishes the decision to bite. And yes, these guys are all real. This is the world of a raptor that decided flying was optional and leg day was permanent. But for it to run like this, stomp like this, and walk literal marathons every day, almost every part of its body had to be rebuilt. So what does a bird look like after evolution rewires it from the talons up? So here's the weird part. You're looking at a bird with a wingspan over 2 meters, basically as wide as a giant human is tall, and it's jogging. On the ground. Chasing a snake like it forgot flying was an option. You might think, why not just go full bomber eagle and nail the snake from above? But what you actually find is that flight, for this bird, is more like public transport than a weapon system. It absolutely can fly. It just saves that fuel for the boring stuff, commuting between tall roost trees and distant hunting grounds, crossing dry riverbeds, or bailing out when a bigger predator shows up. When a jackal or an eagle gets too interested, those huge wings turn into an eject button, launching the secretary bird into the air and away from teeth it really doesn't want to test. During a normal day, though, those wings are mostly along for the walk. You'll see the bird glide short distances over thorn scrub or rocky patches, almost like it's skipping levels in a platformer game. It's not doing tight loops or high-speed dives. Think more low, efficient glides to clear obstacles and less Top Gun remake. On the hunt, the wings suddenly get way more interesting. Watch closely when it corners a snake. The wings half open, like someone cracking a parachute. See, those long legs are fantastic for speed and stomping, but they're also tall, wobbly stilts. When the bird has to pivot, feint, or throw a kick at a moving, biting noodle, those half-spread wings act as stabilizers, catching the air and stopping it from face-planting into its own lunge. And when the snake fights back, the wings can flare all the way out. Now the bird looks way bigger, casting a huge shadow over the ground. To a cobra, this isn't just a bird anymore. It's a sudden wall of feathers and motion. That dramatic flare can spook prey into striking at feathers instead of legs, buying the bird the split second it needs to land a kill shot. Well, why not just fly more and stomp less? Because evolution already spent the budget somewhere else. Those extra long legs, reinforced bones, and thick scales are great for walking literal marathons and kicking with bone-crushing force, but they come with a trade-off. The body is taller, the center of mass is higher, and the whole design is tuned for sprinting, not for the tight aerial maneuvers you see in forest hawks or falcons. Let's imagine you tried to turn this thing into an eagle. You'd have to shorten the legs, compact the body, and basically delete the exact features that make it a snake assassin. This isn't a failed eagle that forgot how to dogfight. This is the world of a specialized hybrid, a raptor that kept just enough flight to survive while pouring almost everything else into being lethal on foot. And that ground-first design changes way more than just its wings. And that ground-first design doesn't just change how it moves. It changes what it dares to eat. Because once you've built a 4-foot-tall raptor with murder stilts, evolution starts asking a wild question. Why stop at mice when you could kick a cobra? You might think secretary birds live on an all-snake diet, like the savanna version of that one friend who only eats hot wings. But what you actually find is a lot more balanced. Depending on the season and the patch of grassland you're in, snakes might be only about 10 to 30% of the menu. The rest is lizards, rodents, small birds, even big insects. So snakes aren't the majority. They're the high-risk, high-reward special. Let's imagine you're this bird, stomping through hot, waist-high grass. A mouse is a quick snack. A grasshopper is barely a mouthful. But a decent-sized snake? That's a long, dense tube of protein and fat. One good kill can equal a whole series of exhausting chases after tiny things that keep diving into burrows. So, from a cold, calorie math perspective, a snake is basically a walking or slithering energy bar. Well, easy calories comes with a catch: venom. One bad strike, and your whole ground-based upgrade screen goes gray. So why gamble? Because almost nobody else wants that job. Jackals, mongooses, some raptors. Sure, they'll take snakes when they can. But most predators would rather not play, "Did I just grab the lethal end?" Secretary birds, with armored legs and a kick that lands in about 15 milliseconds, step into a niche that's only partially occupied. Less competition, more payoff. See, when everyone is diving for rodents, the buffet gets crowded fast. But if you're tall enough, fast enough, and just unreasonably confident, you can specialize in the thing other hunters avoid. That's how you carve out an ecological niche on a savanna where it feels like everything already has teeth, claws, or both. And they don't just wake up knowing how to do this. Young secretary birds watch adults stomp. They follow. They copy. They mess up on harmless prey first. Over time, they learn the distance where a snake can't quite reach, the angle to smash the head instead of the body, the rhythm of strike, hop back, strike again. Older birds probably get way better at this, turning experience into survival, and survival into the next generation watching very closely. This is the world of cultural snake killing. But pull that out for a second. If secretary birds vanish tomorrow, what happens to all those snakes they keep in check? Do jackals and mongooses scale up their efforts, or does the ground-based snake regulator role stay half empty while snake numbers quietly climb? And if the savanna loses its long-legged snake assassin, which predator, if any, could actually afford to evolve into the next one? Well, once you start asking who replaces the secretary bird, you run into a darker question. Who's trying to replace the snakes? Because down in the grass, this isn't just predator versus prey. This is an arms race, and both sides keep upgrading. Let's imagine you're not the tall bird this time. You're the snake, stretched out in the heat. And your best weapon isn't even your fangs yet. It's your paint job. Many savanna snakes are basically the same color as dry grass or dusty soil, with broken patterns that shred their outline. You might think a walking hunter would see you instantly, but what you actually find is that stillness is its own kind of invisibility. See, most predators key in on movement. So a puff adder or cobra just freezes, melts into the straw, and lets antelope legs walk right past. Against a cheetah, that works great. Against a methodical stomper that literally probes the grass with its feet? Suddenly, camouflage has a problem, because the search pattern itself forces you to move. As the bird strides along, it's not just wandering. It's scanning, jabbing, stomping, making the grass twitch. A cryptic snake that wanted to stay invisible now has to make a choice. Keep pretending to be a stick and risk a surprise kick, or break cover and bolt. Both options are dangerous when your enemy has two giant tripods for legs. So the snake switches to plan B, strike first. A coiled snake is basically a biological spring. In a fraction of a second, it can launch its head forward, sometimes faster than you can blink. Venoms are tuned to end fights quickly, built to shut down nerves, blood, or muscle in animals way bigger than a bird. One good hit to an unprotected leg, and the secretary bird stops being a hunter and starts being a cautionary tale. But watch high-speed footage, and the script flips. The secretary bird's kick lands in about 15 milliseconds, often from just outside the snake's optimal strike zone. It's like standing where the boxer's punch is weakest and still tagging them in the face. Those long, scaled legs aren't just armor. They're whips with claws on the end. And yes, these guys are all real. In areas with lots of secretary birds, any snake that's a tiny bit better at staying hidden, striking from a weird angle, or bailing out faster when tall shadows loom might survive to pass on its genes. This is the world of tiny upgrades, slightly flatter coils, slightly quicker retreats, slightly nastier venoms. So, the bird's whole dramatic stomp and kick routine isn't only about killing snakes, it's about not dying to them. Every sprint, every fake-out, every precise blow is shaped by generations of birds that misjudged a cobra by a few centimeters and paid for it. But if the arms race is still going, what other secret upgrades might this bird be hiding that we can't see in slow motion yet? So if the kick is the weapon, the real magic trick is how the bird never lets the snake touch the person holding the weapon. You're looking at a 4-foot-tall raptor that acts like it's socially distancing from a cobra. The head and chest stay way back, the spine angled away, and only this absurdly long leg reaches in to do the punching. Let's imagine you freeze the fight and draw a line from the snake's fangs to the bird's brain. That line is long. The secretary bird is basically fighting with a built-in selfie stick. It leans its body out of range, then snaps the foot forward like a spring-loaded trap. You might think that looks reckless, but what you actually find is a very strict rule. Only the toes enter the danger zone. Everything important stays behind the curtain. And it's not just in and out, it's side to side. The bird almost never stands directly in front of the snake, like it's posing for a school photo. It's circling, sidestepping, constantly shifting that angle. See, every time it slides a few centimeters left or right, the snake has to swivel, re-aim, and guess again when the strike window will open. That tiny delay is all the bird needs to land another stomp before the head lines up. Pattern interrupt. Watch the feet, not the beak. Your brain wants to track the fierce eagle face, but the real story is in the footwork. The legs are doing this fencing match, while the upper body looks almost weirdly calm and upright. Now add wings to the equation. The secretary bird will often half spread them, not to fly, but like a tightrope walker using a pole. Those giant wings act as stabilizers when it has to twist or lunge away from a sudden strike. They also throw off the snake's aim because the outline of the bird just got way bigger and more confusing. Where's the actual torso in that feathery cape? Good luck hitting the center. Down at ground level, the legs themselves are wearing armor. Thick, hard scales and tough skin wrap the lower legs, turning them into something closer to shin guards than bare flesh. And yes, these guys are all real, not some fantasy RPG build. A perfect bite to the joint is still bad news, but a glancing hit on that armor might only scratch, or at least slow the fangs just enough for the bird to yank back. But this is the world of professional avoidance, not tanking. The whole posture screams, "Do not get hit." Long neck pulled back, weight over the safe leg, killing leg darting in and out, eyes locked on the head. Every stomp is aimed to end the snake's ability to strike cleanly at all. So if it looks fearless, it's actually hyper-paranoid. Which raises the next question. What happens when the snake is just as fast, just as paranoid, and refuses to play along? Let's imagine you could slow that showdown down to almost nothing, frame by frame. Because to your eyes, it's just blur-thud snake on the ground. But inside that blur, the secretary bird is running a 4-step program like a living piston. Phase 1. Preload. Before the foot ever drops, the killing leg lifts and freezes for a split second. You might think that's hesitation, like it's reconsidering life choices, but what you actually find is a coiled machine. Muscles in the thigh and drumstick tense, and the long tendons along the back of the leg stretch like someone pulling back a giant slingshot. This is where the spring analogy really kicks in. Let's imagine you've got a bundle of elastic bands. You pull them tight and hold. That stored energy is free power, just waiting for release. In the bird, those elastic bands are tendons. They're not burning extra energy in that instant. They're just holding tension, ready to snap the foot down at snake-killing speed. Phase 2. Release. The joints in the hip and knee unlock, and the leg fires straight down. High-speed video shows that stomp landing in something like 15 milliseconds. That's so fast, your blink is basically a slow-motion replay. The tendons dump their stored energy, the muscles add a final shove, and all that force gets funneled into a single, small target on the ground. Now, Phase 3. Impact. This is where the weird foot design matters. See, a lot of birds have flexible toes that wrap around branches or grab prey. Great for perching, terrible for acting like a hammer. Secretary birds go the other way. Fewer toe bones, stiffer joints, thick scales. The result is less squish, less bend, less energy lost. It's the difference between hitting something with a solid hammer versus a floppy glove. With a floppy glove, energy disappears into all that bending and wobbling. With a hammer, almost everything goes straight into the nail. Here, the nail is a snake's skull or spine. The foot doesn't politely absorb the shock. It delivers it. Phase 4. Recoil. The leg snaps back up instantly, like it touched a hot stove. That recoil is just as important as the hit, because every extra millisecond on the ground is a millisecond of fang-confined skin. Kick, retract, reassess, repeat. And yes, these guys are all real, not some CGI raptor invented for a nature horror movie. Researchers comparing secretary birds to other ground hunters like seriemmas and to typical raptors keep finding the same thing. This is the world of extreme specialization. Their kicks are faster and hit harder for their size than almost anything else on two legs. Well, why go to all this trouble? Because without that mechanical efficiency, the math of walking up to a venomous snake just doesn't work. Too risky, too costly, too many dead birds. The only reason this strategy exists at all is that evolution turned their legs into high-precision pistons. So, if the legs are the weapons, what about the rest of the body? How do you build an entire bird around a pair of living jackhammers? Well, once you've built a bird around a pair of living jackhammers, it would be kind of a waste to only point them at snakes. You might think the secretary bird spends all day doing boss fights with cobras, but what you actually find, if you follow one for a full day, is a very different menu. Let's imagine you're walking alongside one across the savanna. Every few steps, something twitches in the grass. That might be a mouse, a gerbil, or a full-on hare trying to stay flat and invisible. It could be a skink or an agama lizard, a small ground-nesting bird, or a cloud of huge grasshoppers and locusts launching like popcorn. And yes, these guys are all real items on the secretary bird's grocery list. In some areas, they'll even go after baby tortoises, cracking into them with those same precision kicks. See, the snake-killing hardware is actually a general-purpose toolkit. For insects, the bird doesn't need dramatic slow-mo stomps. It just machine guns the ground with quick pecks and light, rapid taps of the feet, stunning grasshoppers before they can jump properly and nailing beetles that try to burrow. It's like someone put a raptor head on a hyperactive chicken body. Mammals are trickier. A hare or rat can really run, so now you get the pursuit mode. Long legs eat up distance fast. The bird angles its run like a sprinter cutting off a lane, then slams a foot down to pin the prey. Not a skull-crushing blow this time, more like a wrestling move. Trap first, then repeated jabs until the struggling stops. For lizards and small birds, it's somewhere in between, with short chases, sudden direction changes, and a lot of last-second ankle feints. And when prey vanishes underground, that's where the careful side shows up. The secretary bird will slow down, probe around burrow entrances with its toes, nudge soil, and stomp lightly to flush something out. It's not just kicking blindly, it's testing for movement, listening for that tiny rustle before committing to a harder strike. So why bother with all this variety if you're already the snake boss? Because snakes are seasonal. In the cold, dry months, many stay deeper, move less, or just aren't out where a walking hunter can see them. Different parts of Africa also have different snake densities. If you only ate venomous noodles, some years you'd starve. Being a generalist is the insurance policy. The same long legs that let the bird walk 20 or 30 kilometers in a day make it a roaming vacuum cleaner for whatever is available. The same sharp eyesight that spots a snake's head above the grass can pick up a mouse's ear twitch or a grasshopper's jump. The same precise kicks that can shatter a snake's spine can just as easily stun a rodent without risking a bite. This is the world of a ground predator that happens to have one very showy party trick. The secretary bird isn't a one-trick snake pony. It's a versatile walking raptor that turned "I can kick anything" into a full lifestyle. Which raises a bigger question. If you're built to rule the ground, why keep those giant wings at all? So if you're a bird that hunts like a land predator, walks like a runway model, and still drags around giant wings, what do humans do with you? We turn you into a character. Let's imagine you're an 1800s clerk in Europe. You've got dark stockings, a long tailcoat, and a bunch of quill pens tucked behind your ear. Now drop that outfit onto a 4-foot-tall raptor. You might think that sounds ridiculous, but what you actually find is the secretary bird. Early observers saw those black leggings, that gray coat, and the spray of head plumes like pens sticking out of a writer's hair, and went, "Yeah, that's the office intern of the savanna." Another idea is less cute and more brutal. Some historians think secretary comes from the Arabic sakr et-tayr, basically hunting bird. Say that fast enough, ship it through a few languages, and it starts sounding like secretaire. And yes, these guys are all real etymologies people argue about. Either way, the name sticks this weird bureaucratic label onto an animal that literally drop-kicks cobras. But if you follow the bird back to Africa, the vibe is very different. Out on the grasslands, people weren't seeing a quirky clerk. They were seeing a long-legged predator that walked straight into snake country and walked back out again. In some regions, it's called the devil's horse, this eerie stalking figure that strides through the heat shimmer. In others, it's just called what it is, snake eater. See, when you live in a place where one wrong step in the grass can put you in the hospital, anything that stomps snakes is going to get a fan club. Stories cast the secretary bird as a kind of guardian of the homestead, a feathered neighbor that patrols the fields and keeps the worst venom on legs. You might think that's just superstition, but what you actually find is a very real drop in snake encounters wherever these birds still work the landscape. And then there's the national level promotion. In South Africa, the secretary bird is literally on the coat of arms. Wings outstretched, head plumes flared. It's used to represent vigilance, authority, and watching from above. Even though, in real life, it mostly commutes on foot. It's like putting a marathon runner on your flag and then drawing them in a sports car. Part of why it got that job is pure aesthetics. Those huge lashes, the eyeliner, the deliberate, almost arrogant walk. This bird looks like a raptor supermodel that decided the runway should be 10 kilometers long. Wildlife documentaries love it because every stride looks intentional. Artists love it because every still frame looks designed. And this is the world of animals that break the rules. A bird that hunts like a mammal, dresses like a clerk, and ends up as a national emblem is exactly the kind of evolutionary chaos we obsess over. But if humans have turned it into a symbol, what happens when the symbol starts disappearing from the savanna? So, if the secretary bird is the savanna's leggy, on-foot snake assassin, who's doing the same job in the sky? You might think all snake-eating birds look like this weird walking crane-raptor hybrid, but what you actually find is a very different crew, the snake eagles. Let's imagine you tilt your camera up. Instead of a tall bird stalking through the grass, you've got a stocky raptor circling in the cold blue air. Shorter legs, chunky body, wide wings, and feet that look like someone put armor plating on a dinosaur hand. Snake eagles and their relatives are built for grab and go. Thick, overlapping scales on the legs. Heavy talons that don't just hold a snake, they clamp it like a carjack. Their whole hunting style is flipped. They either soar in wide circles, scanning for movement, or sit on a high perch acting like feathery CCTV. Then, when a snake shows itself, they drop. One fast dive, wings flare, and those talons punch into the snake, pinning it before it even knows the sky got bigger. A lot of the time, they don't even finish the job on the ground. They just lift the whole angry noodle into the air and fly off to a safer spot, away from other predators and away from most of the snake's options. See, that's their risk profile. Touch the snake for as little time as possible. Grab, squeeze, fly. Kill it on a branch or in midair, then swallow it down like a horrifying spaghetti scene. And yes, these guys are all real. Now drop your view back to the secretary bird. Same basic problem. Venomous animal that really doesn't want to be eaten. Completely different solution. Snake eagles have relatively short legs and insanely strong grasping feet, built to hold and crush. Secretary birds have long, almost stilt-like legs and feet that are less about grabbing and more about delivering a precise downward hammer blow. One is a flying vice, the other is a walking pile driver. That changes everything about the danger calculus. Aerial snake hunters try to win by altitude and speed, minimizing how long fangs are anywhere near skin. Secretary birds accept that they're going to be on the same level as the snake for several seconds, sometimes longer, but they offset that with reach, speed, and accuracy. Long legs keep the body and vital organs high. Fast kicks land in milliseconds, usually aimed at the head, before the snake can even fully strike. Well, evolution clearly looked at, how do you eat a venomous snake, and refused to pick just one answer. This is the world of parallel solutions, airborne grabbers, ground-based stompers, all solving the same deadly puzzle in completely different ways. The secretary bird just happens to be the most terrestrial, hands-on version. But if you're going to live your life kicking venomous reptiles in the face, how do you keep from losing that gamble? So, if betting your life on kicking cobras sounds like a bad career move, you might think evolution would just stop there. One ridiculous bird is enough, right? But what you actually find is that on the other side of the Atlantic, evolution quietly built a backup snake stomper. Let's imagine you're walking through the grasslands of South America instead of Africa. Same blazing sun, same tall grass, same problem of sneaky, bitey noodles hiding where you put your feet. You'd expect hawks circling above, or maybe a jaguar in the bushes. What steps out instead is a seriema, long legs, shaggy crest, and the permanent expression of a bird that's late for something. Seriemas are basically the South American answer to, what if a bird just refused to fly unless absolutely forced? They're ground-dwelling sprinters, chasing down lizards, rodents, and yes, snakes, on foot. When they catch something long and squirmy, they don't delicately nibble it. They grab it in the beak, march over to a handy rock or hard patch of dirt, and start whipping it against the ground like they're trying to reset it back to factory settings. And yes, these guys are all real. This is the world of convergent evolution, where unrelated lineages keep stumbling onto the same basic solutions because the environment keeps asking the same rude questions. Open savanna or grassland gives you wide sightlines, fast prey, and venomous things hiding at ankle level. So, long legs show up again. Running instead of soaring shows up again. Using your feet, not just your face, as weapons shows up again. But here's the twist. Seriemas are not raptors. They don't have that heavy hooked eagle beak or the same predatory ancestry as the secretary-bird. They're closer to old ground-running bird lineages, and it shows. Their whole snake-handling vibe is less surgical strike and more grab first, improvise later. They'll pin with a foot, sure, but a lot of the damage comes from bashing the snake against the ground, not from ultra-precise, high-speed stomps. See, if the secretary-bird is a sniper with steel-toed boots, the Seriema is the cousin who solves every problem with, "What if I just hit it harder?" Same general lifestyle. Patrol the grass, chase things down, keep your body safely above the fangs. But the hardware and the technique are clearly different. What this really tells you is that the savanna-style environment keeps pushing birds toward the same general template. Get taller, stay on the ground, turn your legs into multi-tools. Seriemas show the pattern. The secretary-bird turns it into an extreme sport. Because while Seriemas are impressive, the African version cranks the dial way past grab and bash. Next, you'll see what happens when that basic design gets rebuilt inside a true raptor, and every step, joint, and tendon is redesigned around one thing: the perfect bone-crushing stomp. So, now that you've seen what those legs can do to a single snake, let's zoom out. Because a bone-crushing stomp isn't just a party trick, it's a job. In the savanna food web, secretary birds sit in this weird mid-to-top slot. You might think they're just another raptor, like an eagle that forgot how to fly properly. But what you actually find is a ground-patrolling specialist that hoovers up small to medium prey other hunters either miss or straight up avoid. Rodents, lizards, young hares, big insects, ground-nesting birds, and yes, a steady trickle of snakes that many predators really don't want to gamble on. Let's imagine you're a snake on the savanna. Above you, you've got eagles, hawks, and storks that might swoop if you're exposed. On the ground, you've got mongooses and honey badgers that will happily turn you into a chew toy. And then, striding in from the horizon like a boss battle, comes this tall bird that doesn't bother with ambush at all. It just walks you down in the open and kicks your skull in. This is the world of being snake-shaped in secretary bird country. That constant patrolling matters, because secretary birds don't just pick off the rare cobra doing something stupid. They systematically thin out both venomous and non-venomous snakes across huge territories, especially in the open grassy zones where other predators can't hide easily. Over time, that can help keep certain snake populations from exploding in specific patches of savanna. Not wiping them out, just quietly shaving off the bold, the unlucky, and the ones hunting when the birds are on shift. Now, pull one thread. What happens if those patrols stop? Fewer secretary birds means more snakes surviving each season. More snakes means more pressure on the next tier down. Rodents, small birds, eggs in ground nests, even frog populations around waterholes. You might think that's just nature balancing itself, but ecosystems don't politely rebalance on a schedule. They lurch. See? Mongooses, honey badgers, jackals, and some wild cats also eat snakes, but they hunt differently. They're more tied to cover, or they work in bursts, not in these long, methodical daylight marches that sweep open grass for hours. None of them combine that same patrol range, height advantage, and ground-based, stomp-first style. So the exact snakes that used to get culled by a walking raptor might suddenly have a much easier life. And then you add humans. More snakes near farms and villages means more bites, more livestock losses, more incentive for people to poison or trap anything that looks remotely bitey. You remove one specialized predator, and the feedback loop between wildlife and people gets a little uglier. The scary part is, most of this would start subtly. A few more rodent burrows here, a few more raided nests there, a slow shift in which snakes dominate which grasslands. How far does that ripple if the snake hunter on stilts keeps vanishing from the skyline? And what else, exactly, is riding on those ridiculous legs? So here's the twist you probably felt coming, but didn't really want confirmed. That silhouette on stilts is in trouble. The secretary bird is officially listed as vulnerable, and across big chunks of its range, the numbers are sliding down instead of up. You might think a bird that can walk 30 kilometers in a day and kick cobras in the face would be hard to mess with. But what you actually find is that it's not the snakes that are winning. It's fences, it's tractors, it's roads, power lines, and a whole lot of slow, boring human stuff that a stomping raptor just can't kick. Let's imagine you're that bird, starting your morning patrol. This used to be one huge savanna, a flat buffet of grass and burrows stretching to the horizon. Now, it's a patchwork. Fields of crops, fenced cattle pastures, little housing developments, strips of road. Every time you build up that smooth, ground-eating stride, you hit a barrier, turn, detour, waste energy. See, this species isn't built for tiny territories. It needs big, continuous open areas to do those long daily circuits, scanning for snakes, rodents, anything that twitches. Fragment the habitat, and you don't just shrink their world, you shred their hunting strategy. A bird that hunts on foot can't just flap over to the next intact savanna every time someone plows a field. And then there are the direct hits. Power lines slicing across the horizon like invisible tripwires. Tall, wide-winged birds that fly low and look down for prey are exactly the kind that misjudge a cable and slam into it. Nesting pairs, already rare on the landscape, get disturbed by vehicles, herders, curious people with phones. Sometimes the nests fail. Sometimes the birds just don't come back. Pattern interrupt. Every now and then, they're not just victims, they're suspects. A big, predatory bird walking through a farm? You can guess how that story goes. They're occasionally shot or harassed because someone assumes they're after chickens or small livestock, even though they're mostly patrolling for wild prey, doing free pest control. Well, you might think, can't they just bounce back if a few adults are lost? Not really. Like a lot of giant birds of prey, secretary birds go slow. One nest, a tiny clutch, huge investment in each chick. If an adult dies to a collision or a bullet, you're not losing one bird. You're erasing years of future hunts, future chicks, future patrols across that grass. And yes, these guys are all real, walking around right now, trying to keep a very weird evolutionary bet alive. Because if they go, you're not just losing a species. You're deleting an entire strategy. One of the only raptors on Earth that looked at deadly snakes and said, "Cool, I'll fight those on foot." So how do you even begin to protect something that's specialized? So how do you even begin to protect something that's specialized? You start by looking up. Because while secretary birds do all their dirty work on the ground, their entire family life is literally in the sky. Let's imagine you're walking across the savanna and you finally spot the home base of this snake hunter. You might think it's going to be some neat little eagle nest tucked in a fork of a tree, but what you actually find is a giant, messy landing pad of sticks jammed into the crown of an acacia. It looks like a helicopter tried to build a treehouse. That's the nest. Both parents build it, by the way. This isn't a mom does all the interior design situation. Male and female secretary birds haul sticks up into the canopy, sometimes for years, stacking and weaving until that thing is a huge wooden mattress, over 2 meters across and surprisingly deep. They don't just rebuild every season. They reuse and expand, turning a starter home into a multi-story platform. Why go that high when you're a bird that hates flying? Because height is a cheat code in a landscape full of things that want to eat your kids. Jackals, mongooses, monitor lizards, even some of the same snakes the adults stomp into the dirt. All of them are way worse at tree climbing than ground sneaking. Up in the canopy, the chicks are out of strike range, and the parents get a 360-degree lookout post for anything creeping toward the trunk. See, from that nest, a secretary bird can spot danger and food in the same sweep. 1 second it's scanning for a martial eagle that might try to grab a chick. The next, it's locking onto a movement in the grass 10 football fields away, mentally filing that as future snake nuggets. That high vantage point turns the nest into both nursery and control tower. Inside that platform, the parenting is surprisingly equal. Both adults incubate the eggs, taking turns sitting and cooling off in the shade. Both go on hunting runs. When the chicks hatch, nobody's too proud to do food delivery. The parents bring back whole prey, lizards, rodents, grasshoppers, and yes, snakes, and then carefully tear them into bite-sized pieces, handing out strips of protein like they're running a very intense deli. And this is where the walking matters. Those long daily patrols across the grasslands aren't just leg day for fun. They're a survival subscription service for the nest. Every stomped snake, every sprinted down mouse is potential fuel for chicks that grow fast and need a constant, high-protein drip just to stay alive. So, this is the world of a bird living in 2 vertical realities at once. Nights and family life happen in the trees. Work, danger, and almost all the killing happen on foot. It's a raptor that sleeps like an eagle but hunts like a ground trooper. But how do you actually patrol that much land without burning out and still have energy left to fight venomous snakes? So, if your whole job is marching across a hot savanna, kicking venomous noodles in the face, you can't just wing it as an adult. That kick has to be installed early. And evolution's solution is kind of hilarious. Start with the least threatening predator you've ever seen. Let's imagine you look up at a secretary bird nest. You might think you'll see a mini snake assassin already doing flying jump kicks. But what you actually find is a pile of white fluff with legs like chopsticks and zero coordination. Hatchlings are just downy, wobbling puffballs, totally dependent on their parents to bring food and stand guard. They can't walk properly. They can't thermoregulate in the cold night air. And if a snake showed up, they'd be more appetizer than assassin. But inside that awkward body, the hardware is loading. Those giant legs are already out of proportion. The tendons and bones that will one day deliver bone-crushing force quietly growing while the chick mostly begs, sleeps, and tries not to fall over. For the first weeks, hunting is something that happens off stage. Mom and Dad disappear, then reappear with pre-killed snacks neatly torn into bite-sized strips. Then the practice phase begins. As they get bigger, juveniles start attacking. Absolutely everything in the nest. Sticks, loose feathers, scraps of skin, bits of old snake. They peck, jab, and do these clumsy little stomps that barely move anything. And yes, these guys are all real birds of prey, but right now they look like someone put raptor software into a baby crane. Siblings get dragged into it too. Play fights turn into mini kicking drills, where they learn how far they can swing without losing balance, how hard they can hit before they topple over. You might think the real learning starts when they can fly, but for a secretary bird, flying is almost a side quest. Once they fledge and leave the nest, they drop into the adult world on foot, trailing behind their parents like teenagers shadowing elite martial artists. This is the world of ground patrols now. They watch adults stalk through grass, watch the sudden explosive stomp that turns a snake into a twitching rope, then try it themselves on safer targets: grasshoppers, beetles, tiny lizards that can't bite back. See, that ridiculous, lightning-fast adult kick doesn't just appear. It's built on hundreds, maybe thousands of low-risk screw-ups. Miss the timing on a cricket? No problem. Overshoot a skink and faceplant? Embarrassing, but not fatal. Every failed strike teaches distance, angle, and how to pull the leg back before anything strikes upward. Well, that's the generational relay. Every hyper-precise snake killer was once a clumsy, over-swinging teen bird, running the same drills in the same grass, polishing a move evolution designed but experience perfects. But what happens the first time that half-trained kick meets a cobra that actually wants to win? So, let's imagine we actually slow that moment down. The half-trained kick meets a cobra that very much wants to win. And we hit frame by frame. It's a hot afternoon, air doing that weird shimmer thing where the horizon looks like it's melting. You're at ground level in the savanna. Dry grass, a few thorn bushes, everything buzzing with heat. In the middle of it, a cobra is half hidden, body coiled under a veil of straw-colored stems, hood just starting to rise like a bad idea forming. From the right side of the frame, the secretary bird walks in, not flying, not sprinting. Just that calm, deliberate stride, like it's late to a meeting with death and already knows how it ends. Each step lands heel first, those long, armored legs flexing but never rushing, because rushing is how you misjudge distance and become a cautionary tale. You might think the big dramatic moment is the kick, but what you actually find is the stare. Freeze it right as the cobra's head tilts toward the movement. The bird's eyes lock on. The neck does these tiny micro-adjustments, almost invisible in real time. A millimeter back, a fraction to the side. It's measuring coil tension, strike range, and exactly how far that hood can launch in one go. Frame forward. The cobra commits. Muscles bunch, ribs flare. The whole body turns into a spring. At the same instant, the bird's center of gravity shifts. See, this is the world of overclocked legs. One limb unweights, knee bending, tendons tightening like drawn bowstrings. Slow motion makes it look graceful. At full speed, this kick fires in about 15,000ths of a second. Your blink is late. Zoom on the leg. Claws curl up, not down. It's not trying to grab. It's turning the foot into a flat, armored hammer. The limb snaps straight, all that force channeled into a tiny contact patch right on top of the cobra's head. You can almost see the shockwave travel down the spine. Then, instant recoil. The leg is already gone, yanked back out of strike range before the snake's nerves finish sending the "We've been hit" memo. Pattern interrupt. Now you're the cobra. You launch at what you think is a solid target, fangs first, everything you are focused on that one bite. But the leg that was just there. It's air. Your strike passes under empty space or glances off thick scales you can't get through. By the time your head drops, the bird's foot is already somewhere else, loading the next kick. Impact, reset. Impact, reset. Each stomp aims for the skull or upper neck, because venom doesn't matter if the control center is offline. The hood starts high and furious. A few hits later, it's sagging, strikes getting shorter, slower, less certain. Finally, the cobra goes limp. The bird doesn't celebrate. It just pauses. Head tilts. One cautious prod to the body, then another to the head, testing for that last desperate flinch. Nothing. Only then does it hook the snake with its beak, lift it off the ground, and start to walk. And you have to ask, to an animal that spent millions of years perfecting fangs and venom as its main defense, what does it feel like to meet a predator that wins without ever needing to bleed? So now you've got this tall bird casually walking away with a dead cobra like it just finished taking out the trash, and your brain goes, wait, why didn't it just peck the thing to death? It's a bird. Birds have beaks. Problem solved, right? You might think the beak should be the star weapon here, because the secretary bird's beak is actually pretty impressive. It's sharp, hooked, raptor-grade hardware, great for tearing flesh, ripping skin, and neatly pulling apart a rodent like a little biological can opener. It's also amazing for precision jobs, plucking, repositioning, feeding chicks. But what you actually find, if you watch them hunt, is that the beak almost never enters the fight early. See, the beak comes with one giant design flaw for snake work. It's attached to the face. To stab with the beak, the bird has to bring its eyes, nostrils, and brain case right down to the same level as a very awake, very annoyed reptile that has spent its whole life practicing one move: launch your face at its face. That's not a duel. That's a bad trade. Let's imagine you're a snake for a second. If a predator leans in head first, that's your dream scenario. You don't have to reach the heart or lungs. One good hit to the eye, the inside of the mouth, or right at the base of the skull, and you've just delivered venom straight into the command center. Even a non-venomous snake can do serious damage there. A broken eye, a smashed beak, and this bird is done hunting on the savanna. So, evolution does something smarter. It pushes the violence way down the body, into the legs. The secretary bird is basically walking around on built-in bow staffs. Those long legs create a safety radius, a bubble of, you can die over there while I stay over here. The vital organs and sensory gear sit high and far back, while the feet are the only parts that are allowed to enter the kill zone on purpose. Those feet are not delicate, by the way. Thick scales, shortened toe bones, and a crazy fast strike mean the bird can dump several times its own body weight into a stomp that lands in about 15 milliseconds. To the snake, the foot might as well teleport. It's getting hit by a tiny, focused sledgehammer before its brain even finishes the thought, bite now. And yes, these guys are all real. You can watch high-speed footage where the bird's head barely moves while the legs are doing full Mortal Kombat below. The strategy is obvious. Keep the sensors up. Keep the weapons down. Only when the snake is clearly broken, no more coiling, no more striking, just limp meat on sand, does the beak finally clock in. Now it's safe to hook the body, flip it, drag it, tear it into pieces, or carry it off to a nest full of very excited dinosaur babies. This is the world of secretary bird design. If a body part can stay out of venom range, it does. The feet are the only volunteers. Everything else is management, watching from a safe distance while the legs do the dirty work. So if the legs are doing all the dirty work, you have to ask, what are they doing? The other 99% of the time, they're not pile-driving snakes into the dirt. Walking. Just endless walking. You might think a bird this tall, with a 2-meter wingspan, would be gliding majestically over the savanna like a low-budget eagle. But what you actually find is a raptor that treats flying like you treat leg day, only when absolutely necessary. Most of its hunting life happens at a steady ground-level march. Let's imagine you're pacing beside one. Step after step, hour after hour, it cruises over flat grassland at a calm, almost lazy walk. That slow pace is secretly a power move, because flapping those giant wings all day would burn through energy like a jet engine. Walking on long, springy legs? That's economy mode. Same distance, way less fuel. So now, instead of scanning one tiny patch from the air and then resting, this bird can patrol huge territories daily, sweeping for snakes, lizards, rodents, anything that twitches. To pull that off, the whole body is rearranged around the legs. See, a lot of raptors are basically flying shoulders with talons attached, heavy chest, massive flight muscles, big head. The secretary bird goes the other way. The upper body is relatively light, the wings are still big but not overbuilt, and the real investment is in the hips and thighs hidden under those fancy feathers. You're looking at thick, endurance-focused leg muscles that can walk for kilometers and then instantly switch into sprint and stomp mode when something dangerous appears. And yes, these guys are all real athletes. High-speed footage shows that when they do stomp, the foot hits in just a few milliseconds with several times the bird's body weight. But you can't throw those kinds of kicks if your support system is fragile. So the feet are weirdly dual purpose, weapons and walking shoes. The toes are a bit shorter and stiffer than in many other raptors. The joints and scales are reinforced, and the whole structure spreads out impact so it can stand on rocks, thorns, and hard-baked ground all day without shredding itself. Then there's the heat problem. This bird is basically a black and white solar panel walking around in full sun. Why doesn't it just overheat and pass out next to the snakes? Long legs help again. They lift the body up into slightly cooler air above the scorching ground layer, and all that skinny leg surface works like a built-in radiator, dumping excess heat as it moves. Put it all together, and you get the real secret of the snake specialist. It's not just about how it kills, but how far it can walk to even find something worth killing. Without that energy-efficient, long-distance patrol lifestyle, it would meet way fewer snakes and could never afford to specialize. But what happens when you finally do spot one in the grass? That's when the walking machine suddenly turns into a sprinter. So, the walking machine starts sprinting, but it's not just running at a snake like some clueless feathered maniac. It's locking on, because with secretary birds, the real weapon isn't the leg first. It's the targeting system strapped to the top of that long neck. Let's imagine you're standing at snake eye level in the grass. Looming above you is this bird with giant, dark eyes that look almost cartoonishly big for its head. You might think they're like an eagle's, built to scan the sky for distant flying things, but what you actually find is almost the opposite. Those eyes are large and forward-facing, with a razor-sharp fovea like other raptors, but they're angled down, tuned for searching the ground, not the clouds. This is the world of ground vision, high visual acuity, but pointed straight into the messy chaos of grass, rocks, and dirt. From that elevated vantage point, the bird can pick out tiny shape anomalies, a curve that doesn't match a twig, a pattern that doesn't quite look like dead leaves. And yes, these guys are all real snakes, not props, hiding in places where you would absolutely step without noticing. Now, snakes have a classic move. If they don't slither, maybe you don't see them, so they freeze. But the secretary bird doesn't just stare from one angle and hope. As it walks, it's constantly shifting perspective, swinging that long neck, changing the view every step. Motion that's invisible from one angle suddenly pops from another. A barely there tongue flick, a coil tightening, one blade of grass snapping back. See, your brain is great at spotting motion, but this bird is basically running a live motion detector over the savanna. Even when it stops its body, the head keeps working. Tiny, rapid bobs and tilts, like a camera trying to autofocus in real time. Those micro-movements give it parallax, the way objects at different distances slide past each other as you move your viewpoint. That's where depth perception comes in. When you're about to kick something that can inject venom into your leg, roughly the right distance is not good enough. The bird has to judge exactly how far that coiled head is, how high off the ground, and how fast it's about to launch. One bad estimate, and the kick whiffs, or lands too close, or too late. So, those quick head bobs aren't just bird fidgeting, they're range finding. Each tilt updates a 3D map. Here's the head, here's the body, here's where the next strike is coming from. The eyes track every micro-adjustment the snake makes, waiting for that tiny pre-strike tension that says, now. Without this level of visual precision, all that mechanical power in the legs would be wasted. You can have a kick that hits with several times your body weight, but if you miss the skull by a few centimeters, the snake is still very much in the game. The eyes turn that kick from random stomping into surgical execution. But once the target is locked and the distance is perfect, how does that kick actually land so fast that the snake can't even see it coming? That kick is terrifying on its own, but the reason you can't stop watching it isn't just physics. It's psychology. It's your brain quietly screaming, "Snake?" even though you're perfectly safe on your couch. You might think you're just curious about a cool bird, but what you actually find is your own fear getting poked over and over. Humans are weirdly good at spotting snake shapes. Curved line in the grass? Your brain flags it before you even know why. That's because for millions of years, missing a snake was way more expensive than overreacting to a stick. So even if you're not afraid of snakes, your nervous system kind of is. Now drop a snake into frame and crank it to high stakes. Venom. Fangs. That low, coiled posture that looks like a loaded spring. Your body treats that like a jump scare that just keeps going. And then, out of nowhere, this tall, elegant bird just walks straight at it like it's late for a meeting. That clash hits something deep. Part of you wants to look away. The rest of you leans in. Because what you're really watching is catharsis. A living symbol of stealth and danger gets absolutely outplayed by a bird in fancy pants. Every stomp is this bizarre mix of relief and horror. Relief because the snake, the thing your brain has been trained to panic about, is losing. Horror because the way it loses is brutal, fast, and very, very final. You don't just see a predator win. You see the threat get physically erased. Let's imagine the same scene without style. No music, no slow motion, just shaky handheld footage. You'd still flinch, but it wouldn't feel like a boss fight. See, documentaries know exactly what they're doing. Ominous music when the snake first appears. Tight close-ups on the eyes, the tongue flicks, the talons flexing. Then that slow-motion replay of the kick, so you can actually savor the moment where the monster gets shut off like a light switch. And yes, these guys are all real. The bird really is that tall. The snake really is that dangerous. But the editing turns a quick stomp into a full action sequence. You're not just watching a hunt. You're watching a story your brain already knows. Danger rises. Hero appears. Showdown. Resolution. This is the world of animal archetypes colliding. On one side, the serpent, low, cold, ancient, the classic symbol of hidden threat. On the other, a raptor in crane cosplay, upright, sharp-eyed, moving on those huge legs that hit harder than its wings ever could. It's almost mythological, like someone put eagle and snake slayer into a blender and forgot to add subtle. So is it any surprise the secretary bird becomes a wildlife icon? It packages two of our strongest animal images, raptor and serpent, into a duel that happens on foot, right at eye level. Not a distant speck circling in the sky. A ground fight, in your face, where every kick feels personal. And once you've seen that, how do you not want to know what else this bird can do? So, once you've watched this bird roundhouse a cobra into the afterlife, you might think, wait, why isn't every grassland on Earth crawling with snake-stomping birds? Open country is not some rare African glitch. You've got prairies in North America, pampas in South America, steppes in Eurasia, savannas in Australia. Venomous snakes? Also basically everywhere. But what you actually find is that the secretary bird is kind of alone out here. Let's imagine you try to design a copycat. Tall raptor, long legs, walks all day, kicks like a tiny dinosaur. Seems easy, right? Well, evolution doesn't get to order parts from a catalog. It has to work with whatever weird bird is already standing around when the environment changes. And when African savannas exploded into those huge open landscapes a few million years ago, the ancestor of the secretary bird just happened to be a long-legged, ground-friendly raptor with wings it didn't mind underusing. See, that starting point matters. If your ancestors are already specialized cliff hunters, or forest ambushers, or high-speed aerial fish thieves, you're locked into a different upgrade path. Turning a typical hawk or eagle into a full-time terrestrial sprinter isn't just walk more. You'd need longer, shock-absorbing legs, stiffer toes, different muscles, new balance control, tougher scales. That's a giant anatomical remodel for a lifestyle that might not even pay off, because in a lot of places, the snake-eating job is already taken. In India and Southeast Asia, you've got mongooses basically built to bully cobras. In Europe and North America, mustelids like badgers and weasels will happily chew on reptiles. In many regions, other snakes are the main snake predators. If mammals and snakes are already dominating that niche, a bird trying to move in has to be not just good, but absurdly good to compete. And yes, these guys are all real. This is the world of niche wars, where who gets to eat whom is decided by millions of years of head starts. On African savannas, big mammal predators focus more on hoofed animals. That leaves a little window for a weird bird to specialize in sprinting after smaller ground prey, including snakes, without constantly getting shoved aside by some hyper-aggressive mongoose army. On top of that, most raptors are really committed to the sky. Their whole design screams, grab from above. Shorter legs, massive talons for clutching, wings tuned for soaring or high-speed dives. If they tried to become secretary-style walkers, they'd sacrifice aerial performance long before their legs got good enough to outkick a venomous snake. The trade-offs just don't pencil out. So the secretary bird ends up as this rare evolutionary experiment that actually worked in one particular place at one particular time. A grassland raptor that said, "What if I just stopped flying so much and started kicking things?" Next, to see how far that experiment really goes, you have to look inside the legs that make the whole strategy possible. So, let's imagine someone actually hires you to solve the snake problem. Not with a snake hook, not with a drone, but with a ground robot that has to walk right up to a venomous cobra on uneven savanna and shut it down. No cages, no nets, just legs and physics. Where do you even start? You might think you'd build some kind of low, tank-like rover. Heavy armor, tracks, maybe a flamethrower if you're feeling dramatic. But what you actually find, when you look at what already works in the real world, is that evolution has basically pre-designed your concept art. It's tall, it's weird, and it's already out there kicking snakes, the secretary-bird. First blueprint feature, those giant legs. You want long, articulated limbs with a huge step length, because rough ground is a nightmare for short robots. The bird's 1.3-meter frame lets it step over rocks and grass tufts that would flip a Roomba. A snake hunting bot would copy that stilt walker vibe. High clearance, shock-absorbing joints, and ankles that can angle and twist without snapping the whole machine. Then you steal the feet. The secretary bird has stiff, reduced toe bones that basically turn its foot into a biological hammer. Your robot needs the same idea at the end effector. Not soft, grippy pads, but a rigid striking surface that concentrates force into a small area. One fast stomp, huge pressure, snake skull offline. High-speed footage shows the bird landing kicks in about 15 milliseconds. So your actuators? They have to fire faster than a snake can launch a strike, but power is useless without aim. See, the bird is constantly tracking the snake's head, adjusting microsteps and tiny angle changes before every hit. That's your control system spec sheet right there. You'd build in cameras and depth sensors locked onto the head, feeding a real-time loop that tweaks leg position and timing on the fly. No pre-planned animation, just continuous corrections as the snake whips around. Safety-wise, the bird gives you another obvious rule. Keep the important stuff far away from the danger zone. Its head and eyes stay back, its body weight stays behind the hips, and only the lower legs enter bite radius. For your robot, that means processors, batteries, and main sensors ride high on a central tower, while the legs are basically sacrificial shock absorbers. If something gets tagged, it's a replaceable limb, not the brain. And yes, these guys are all real design choices evolution already tested for millions of years. You'd sit down on day one and sketch almost the same thing. Tall, long-legged, fast-kicking, sensor-guided, with the squishy bits kept safely upstairs. So what happens when you stop just copying the outline and actually run the numbers on how hard those legs can hit? So when you run the numbers, you hit the real twist. This thing has eagle DNA, raptor hardware, all the software you'd expect for dive bombing from the sky. And it basically said, "No thanks, I'm going to walk." You might think a bird of prey automatically upgrades into a flying missile, but what you actually find is a ground unit that doubled down on legs. Let's imagine you tried to only change one piece. Just give an eagle long legs and call it a day. It would snap ankles on landing, miss half its strikes, and probably get bitten by every snake it ever met. See, the secretary bird only makes sense when you look at the whole package at once. The long, shock-absorbing legs, the stiff, reduced toe bones, the thick, almost armor-like scales, the 15-millisecond stomp, the razor-sharp eyesight, and that weirdly methodical savanna patrol behavior. This is the world of integrated design. It is tall, so it can see over the grass. It walks all day because scanning from the air would miss snakes hiding under tufts and shrubs. Its feet are stiff because a floppy foot wastes impact, and its kicks are insanely fast because a cobra that never even sees the hit cannot aim its fangs. Even the way it handles a wounded snake, stepping back, re-aiming, going for the head again and again, plugs right into that same strategy. Stay just outside strike range. Turn venom into a non-issue. And yes, these guys are all real raptors. They still have hooked beaks. They still rip meat. They still swallow chunks of rodent and lizard. But they blow up your mental image of what a bird of prey is supposed to do. Raptors are not a flying club with strict rules. They are a job description. Kill other animals efficiently. Most do it from above. This one does it like a sprinting, high-precision jackhammer. So suddenly, the stereotype cracks. If a raptor can become a long-legged snake assassin, what else could the template do? You already have owls hunting by sound, falcons as guided bullets, vultures as cleanup crews. The secretary bird is the ground combat branch, showing you that evolution can retool the same basic chassis for a completely different battlefield. And out on the savanna, that choice matters. Fewer snakes around nests and villages. Rodents and insects kept in check. A tall, unmistakable silhouette that humans noticed so much they literally put it on national emblems as a symbol of vigilance and justice. This is not just a quirky bird that kicks stuff. It is a piece of how the ecosystem and the culture both think about danger, which sets up the uncomfortable part. Once you see how many systems had to line up to make a bird that hunts snakes on foot, losing it stops feeling like losing a fun oddity. It feels like shredding a one-of-one blueprint. So what happens when that carefully tuned design runs into something it cannot outwalk or outkick? A disappearing savanna. So let's imagine you're back in that grass. Same place, same heat. Same dry rattle of wind through seed heads taller than your shoulders. You feel it again before you see it. That cold electric touch at your ankle. The hiss. The blur of scales. Your brain does the math in one heartbeat. Venomous. Too close. No time. Last time, this was pure nightmare fuel. You might think the only options are panic or prayer. But what you actually find, now that you know more, is a third thing. You start looking for patrol. Because this isn't just random grass anymore. This is the world of invisible routes, long looping circuits that a 4-foot-tall raptor walks every day like it's on shift. Out beyond your little circle of terror, something is already sweeping the savanna, step by deliberate step, for exactly this kind of coiled problem. You hear it before you see it, not a heroic screech from above. Just that weird, heavy rustle of long legs pushing through grass, like someone speed-walking in stilts. The secretary bird doesn't dive in from the sky like a movie eagle. It clocks the movement, angles its body, and simply accelerates. More cheetah than hawk, head steady, legs turning over like pistons. Last time, this felt like a miracle cameo. Random bird drops in, stomps the snake, roll credits. But now you know, this is not improv. This is a specialist on its daily route, doing the thing its entire skeleton has been edited around. Reduced toe bones to stiffen the kick. Thick, scaled skin like built-in shin guards. A strike that lands in about 15 milliseconds, with several times its body weight focused into one tiny, unlucky patch of snake. From your point of view, it still looks reckless. This giant bird just walks straight at a venomous animal you're trying very hard not to even breathe near. But watch the details. The way it stays just outside, strike range, feinting with one foot while the other is already coming down. The way every stomp targets the head, not the body. That isn't chaos. That's controlled physics. See, what read as wild flailing when you were only scared now reads like biomechanics in high speed. You're not just seeing predator versus prey. You're seeing a design problem being solved in real time. How do you kill something that can kill you faster? Longer legs, faster kicks, armor where it counts. Evolution going, what if we make the raptor heiser taller? And yes, these guys are all real. Real enough that for a lot of small mammals, lizards, even other birds, this daily stomp patrol quietly trims the danger level. You walk away thinking you got lucky. The savanna walks away statistically safer. So that original clip in your head shifts. It stops being just a jump scare with feathers and turns into a story about adaptation and risk management. Different bodies, same deadly problem. Venom in the grass. The question now is, what happens to that whole safety net when the patrol routes themselves start to break? So, when those patrol routes start to break, you're not just losing a cool bird that does jump scares on snakes. You're losing one of evolution's weirdest case studies in how far a body plan can actually bend when the environment keeps turning the screws. Let's imagine you're designing a generic bird of prey. You might think, big wings, sharp claws, attack from above, done. But what you actually find, out on the open savanna with venom in the grass and food competition in the sky, is that the standard raptor template starts to glitch. The air is crowded with eagles and vultures. The danger is mostly on the ground. So the secretary bird does something outrageous. It keeps the raptor hardware in the face and beak, and then stretches the legs into stilt-like battering rams. This is the world of evolutionary pressure testing. You take flight, which is supposed to be the defining trait of birds, and ask, okay, what if we barely use that for hunting? You take legs, which usually just move the bird from perch to perch, and crank them into precision weapons that can stomp with several times the bird's body weight. Edge cases like this are where biologists see how flexible traits really are. How optional is flight? How long can legs get before running and balance break down? How much can behavior shift while the skeleton still technically counts as raptor? And it's not doing this alone. Snake eating is such a universal problem that evolution keeps rerunning the experiment. Seriamas in South America also chase prey on foot and smack snakes on the ground, but they didn't go full savanna sprinter with 4-foot-tall legs. Snake eagles still dive from above, relying on thick scales and armor-like feathers instead of sprint speed. Mongooses use agility and partial venom resistance. Same basic boss fight, completely different builds, and yes, these guys are all real. Only the secretary bird went all in on walking and stomping as its main strategy. See, when you protect something this oddly specialized, you're not just saving one species on a poster. You're preserving a live archive of evolution's wildest what-if scenarios. Every secretary bird is a data point in a giant, ongoing experiment about how far you can push bird anatomy to solve the simple problem of a snake in the grass. Lose the bird, and you erase a whole set of answers we didn't fully read yet. And that circles back to you. If a bird can reinvent what it means to be a raptor just to handle venomous noodles hiding in the grass, what other rules of nature are we quietly underestimating? What other body plans are already warping at the edges that we haven't even noticed yet? So, let's imagine you rewind the whole story we've just walked through and watch it in fast forward. It starts with you in the grass, right? That creepy feeling that something long, scaled, and venomous might be inches from your ankle, completely invisible. You might think the logical hero here would be an eagle dropping out of the sky. But what you actually find is a bird that just walks straight in. Out of that grass steps this tall, crane-looking raptor, calmly striding like it's late for a meeting. This is the world of the secretary bird. Instead of circling overhead, it patrols. It treats the savanna like a treadmill, walking tens of kilometers a day, scanning the ground for the tiniest twitch that might be a mouse, a lizard, or a very bad day shaped like a cobra. We broke down the hardware that makes that possible. long, armored legs wrapped in thick scales, built like biological shin guards. Stiff, spring-loaded feet with fewer toe bones, so every stomp hits like a steel bar instead of a floppy chicken leg. Ultra-fast kicks that land in about 15 milliseconds, with forces several times the bird's own body weight focused into a tiny area of snake. It's not just kicking, it's basically dropping a tiny, precise hammer from orbit. On top of that, you've got ground-oriented vision. The eyes aren't pointed up at soaring rivals. They're locked on the dirt, tuned for the micro-movements of something trying very hard not to be seen. And the whole patrol lifestyle turns walking itself into a weapon. Every step is a scan. Every scan is a chance to start a chase. Sprint, feint, stomp, reset. All of that plugs straight into the arms race we watched play out. Venomous snakes come in with camouflage, lightning strikes, and fangs that can end the fight in one mistake. The bird answers by staying just outside that strike zone, targeting the head, and hitting first, harder, and faster than a snake can even process. One clean kick to the skull and the apex venom machine is suddenly just lunch. Zoom out, and it's not just a party trick. As a snake regulator, the secretary bird helps keep some of the most dangerous reptiles in check. As a savanna specialist, it fills this weird niche between big cats, jackals, and vultures. Culturally, it's a national symbol, a coat of arms bird, a documentary regular, and yes, these guys are all real, not CGI fever dreams from an over-caffeinated animator. So we end where we started, with that central, ridiculous image. A raptor that hunts more like a cheetah than an eagle, striding through the grass toward some of Africa's deadliest snakes. And winning. Again, and again, and again. So now that you've watched this long-legged chaos machine sprint through the grass and punt venom for a living, what do you actually do with that? Let's imagine you go back to those secretary bird clips you've seen 100 times. This time, don't just see bird versus snake. Watch the legs. You might think it's just random stomping, but what you actually find, frame by frame, is a precision weapon. In real time, the kick is a blur. In slow motion, you can track the whole chain, the coil in the hip, the snap at the knee, the toes barely flexing because the bones are stiffened for impact, the head always tilted just out of strike range. Re-watch one hunt and ask yourself, where is the risk and where is the control? Then, zoom out. If this bird rewrote the raptor rulebook, who else tried something similar? Look up Seriemas in South America, jogging through scrub and booting lizards and snakes with the same absolutely not today attitude. Check out snake eagles, which still hunt from the air but solve the same problem with thick leg scales and crushing talons instead of a ballistic kick. Different continents, different bodies, same basic question. How do you eat danger and not die? And yes, these guys are all real. This is the world of convergent evolution, where nature keeps reinventing the ground hunter with upgraded legs like it's a favorite character skin. You start to see patterns: long legs, reinforced feet, careful head angles, a weird calm around things that should absolutely ruin your day. But while we're enjoying the show, the stage those birds run on is shrinking. Secretary birds need huge stretches of open savanna to spot snakes before they step on them. When that grassland turns into overgrazed pasture, crops, or scrub that's too tall and dense, the bird built to walk loses its runway. So, if you want this bizarre strategy to stick around, you support the habitat. That can look like backing organizations that protect African savannas and raptors in general, whether it's big names like BirdLife Partners and raptor conservation groups, or local reserves that keep open grassland from being carved up. It can be as simple as choosing tourism operators that actually care about wildlife, or sharing the story so the snake-kicking national bird is seen as something worth keeping, not just a cool meme. Because if this video worked on you at all, it's probably because you like it when evolution goes off the rails. Well, this channel lives in that space. If one bird that decided wings are optional, legs are weapons, grabbed your brain, there are crustaceans that farm, fish that walk, and insects that hijack other animals' faces waiting for you in the next episodes. So, the next time you imagine being stuck in the grass with a snake, remember, somewhere out there, evolution already hired a long-legged bodyguard that hunts venom on foot. Now go see what other monsters it built.